I am Bukalarios here, and I am going to be expanding upon the subject that is Byzantine archery, if you want to use that term. I've been engaged in historical archery's videos. They're his short videos on the information provided to us about Roman archery within Roman military texts. I just want to expand upon these topics because there are things that I see that I agree with, and things that I see that I disagree with, and things that I see that I do think require a little bit more putting into context. So it's just me describing my logic. I don't consider myself an authority on the topic. I don't think anybody really does. Nobody really has the claim to authority on the topic of Roman archery. Now, I want to disclaim that there is no official conclusion as to what exactly most of these things are. For the most part, we can always use educated guesses, and that's what everybody basically does. In the first case that I'm going to be sort of looking at is string lock technique that involves pressing this, or pressing the thumb on the index finger. And so I've had videos on this before. I've since then, from those older videos, kind of changed my opinion on the topic. I'm sure that's Historical Archery has looked at my new videos as well, since he's a frequenter of this channel, and saw that I have a new kind of thesis on what this could possibly be. Now, I don't disagree with your rationale of this concept of that being something akin to what you would find depicted of these Easterners in Greek artwork, involving these two fingers on the string, hence, two fingers, and then pressing on them with a thumb. I think this is a perfectly good technique to use. If you wanted to do this on this side, I think it's a perfectly historical technique. At some point, you can do it like this. It works. It works very well. And I do very much vouch, if you want to shoot on the outside, that you do use this reverse technique, because then the string twist, if we know the concept of that, does involve a clean pass of the arrow. Okay, so then you come back, and it works. You can get good results that way. So I think that it is a good technique, but I don't think that this is what Syrianos was describing personally. One, that there were Slavs in the empire, and so what about Slavic archery do we know? We do know that Slavs were those people within the empire that were subjects of the emperor that did this. So I personally think that when Syrianos is describing two fingers, that the finger on thumb performing this technique isn't necessarily what is bearing the weight of the string. So personally, these two fingers don't have to be the ones necessarily pulling that string. What it could very well be is that it could be involving a pinch of the arrow. But I don't think that it is a primary draw like you would think, because in this case, that is such a useless shot to do because you have no grip over the bow. But instead, they're the ones gripping the arrow, and the string itself is actually instead placed by two other fingers, which would be these, but specifically the tips. So it's not a hook, all right, but it's the tips. And I can actually use this reason because it does actually exist in an ancient form of archery from India. If you want to actually sort of start connecting dots culturally and how cultural diffusion works with martial practices, sort of classical India of the 16th century BCE kind of becomes this sort of origin point of the overall concept of Indo-European archery. In fact, fun fact, there is actually more evidence to consider that what we call the Mediterranean draw, which is an ahistorical term for it, that's the idea of this, of using the three fingers, has its ancient origins in Indian archery, which involves pulling with the tips, right? And so you have this technique, and it's a very smooth technique, and it works very well, but it comes from Asia, from a group of people of Indo-Europeans, in which they come from a larger group that's spread out in all different directions. So if anything, it's not something that originated in the Mediterranean, it's probably more so something that originated in Central Asia. That because there's an existing technique that involves a pinch of the arrow, which you can probably say that this is the case, but also is being held by the finger pads of these two fingers. So you're actually pressing on the string rather than pulling it. So you press on the string while also gripping this, and therefore you're achieving the concept that Syrianus is calling finger on the thumb. So you're pinching the arrow, and then you're also going to be pulling in this case. So what it would end up looking like is this, and this exists in Indian archery. So whatever this may be, something of this archetype could also transfer to those groups that would be coming into the empire like the Slavs. So I think it's a form of Slavic draw. I can't conclude this completely. Again, this is all just guesswork, but the technique would basically look something like that, and it works really well. I loved how that felt, so I'm just gonna do this one more time. Just as well, if this was the technique that we're talking about, this is using the grooves of the index and middle fingers, which is the same thing that you would be doing for the 3 middle finger draw, unless the 3 middle finger draw itself is something that uses different portions of the fingers, like what we would see is this later French technique. But in this case, we'll just do the more likely reason and say that the 3 middle fingers itself is akin to the Mediterranean draw that we would incorrectly say that it is. So it's something that uses the distal grooves. So in that case, if we used this technique and then decided that our fingers were getting torn up, they were getting tired, then we use this one, or vice versa, we go from here to here, that kind of kills the point because you're still using the same portions of the fingers. So therefore it kind of kills the point of what Syrianus said, to use different techniques to relieve the fingers of tension. You could technically do this, all right? So that way you're pulling with instead the proximal grooves in this case. And I think it's perfectly fine to do that. We do see this in this ancient artwork as well. But again, there's another concept here, and it's that it's only using 2 fingers on the string. So if you have these here, but then also pressed down with the thumb on these, that is technically 3 fingers bearing the weight of the string, 2 on the string and 1 supporting it. And I can tell that this is the logic because when he describes the opposite, that is 2 fingers using a thumb draw. So in the logic of Syrianus, as he describes it, is that what counts as the string, as the fingers bearing the weight, is the fingers that are on the string as well as the fingers that are reinforcing those other fingers that are on the string. So in this case, this wouldn't be considered a 2-finger draw. This is a 3-finger draw to him. The point is that I personally disagree with this concept of this being the 2-finger thumb on 4-finger idea. I think that something akin to this, or at the very least something akin to this, is a little bit more likely to be the case. In this case, you're pushing with the pads instead of marrying up the distal grooves again and again, because that way now you're actually going to be using different parts of your finger. The next thing to sort of comment on is the idea of where we are anchoring the string. So Syrianus has 3 anchors. Obviously he has the breast draw, that is something that is much more Greek in origin, but also the neck draw and the toward the ear draw. That doesn't mean necessarily at the ear, it just means toward the ear. What that means is that it's a full draw that places the string by the face as much as it can. And so when I was observing how you were doing it, historical archery, I'm just kind of noticing that there are a few differences between how you and I sort of interpret that. Now, it could be more so that you're just more used to shooting it in the way that you were shooting it. What I'm noticing, especially when you were doing the neck draw, is that you were anchoring at the neck, but it doesn't actually accord to the length in this case. So if we want to, and if I want to make this a little bit more clear, is that I interpret these 3 techniques as sort of a stepping stair. So the anchor point is where you bring the back of the arrow to, and it accords both to height. So obviously the chest is lower than the neck, which is lower than the ear, as well as length. So it actually comes up, if you want to perform a breast draw, it comes up to here, neck draw, it comes to here, and then ear comes up to here. So it's this sort of slope. The Homeric draw is that you would do something like this, right? And so as you can see, it comes up only to the point that it's before the face if we were to compare this to just one single height, all right? Then you bring it up a little higher, so therefore you see where the string is still before the face. What it looked like is that you were actually kind of anchoring it about right here. Breast anchor, all right, neck anchor, and then toward the ear, which is as far as you can get it, right? So when you perform the neck anchor, by literally just bringing it as low as the neck and only interpreting it as the lower length, despite the fact that it's accorded with 3 different outputs of power and therefore 3 different horizontal lengths. What you end up getting is that the string is more beside the face, and it ends up resembling something more toward the ear, just that it's much lower. So what you were performing in this case by taking to the neck is that you're actually performing a toward the ear technique, just that it's lower than the ear itself. The concept of a slope, where you have the Homeric anchor, and then you come up, and you can definitely tell that you've performed this correctly if you can. And I've noticed that you're using a Tiran bow from Mishkorovchanin. So it's something similar in size to this bow. What you would be doing is using an Olympic anchor at this case, which is why I call it this. It also accords to an anchor at the lip. Now, there are benefits to doing it specifically this way. It's more in line with the body, all right? The arrow is very much in line with the body, so what you end up doing is having a very easy way to anchor, so that way it's naturally lining your vision, the arrow, and the target, so that way you can get a very high degree of precision of your shots. That I can get a relatively high amount of precision and a slower spread of shots. So there's my arrow, and there we go. So it's something that helps a high degree of technical accuracy, because that's generally the effect that it's supposed to have toward the ear. There. Simple enough. Get to see people actually perform, or anybody perform Roman archery of this period exactly the way it's described in manuals, probably because nobody thinks that Syrianos' manual is even a 9th century manual, despite the fact that it's been disproven since 2007. You know, I used to think that it was a 6th century manual myself. So, you know, I forgive all of you, okay? And I forgive myself as well. So let's start using some updated scholarship at this point. Historical archery, you obviously use the updated scholarship. I thank you so much for actually doing this, because now people are getting better context at this point. Just to disclaim, how you perform your techniques is perfectly fine. If you can hit a target, that is all that matters. It's just that when we want to interpret this as literally as possible, that we know that this was a system that they used, then we just have to interpret it as literally and as logically as we possibly can. So if you want to do it with shooting on the outside with the thumb draw, which is probably more common thing to do, would look like this. 1. All right. So that was the Homeric draw. Number 2. And then towards here. There we go. Either way, historical archery, thank you for expanding the discussion of the topic. I really appreciate it, doing the Lord's work in this case. It's a topic that very few people actually take seriously, and there's just so many misconceptions surrounding it, which hopefully now we're going to be breaking that down. So I hope this video has been a little helpful to you and to other people, to help you develop the form of Roman archery as well. Like I said, nothing is set in stone. New information is constantly being recovered, but because we also do have a basis of written work, then we have a very good solid basis to go around on. So I bid you luck, Tuksotai, in your journey of Roman archery and archery even.